Daylight saving time is this weekend, which means one less hour of sleep.
Oh, it also means some extra sunshine, though. But let's talk about the medical side of this all. While extra sunshine in the evening may be nice, a loss of sleep can really be disruptive, especially to the kiddos. This morning, Dr. Ida Khanum with Pediatric Concierge Pediatrics joins us to talk about ways to help your child adjust to that change. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
An hour of sleep seems really like not that big of a deal, but it sort of is, right? So how do we prepare for that?
So for kiddos, I mean, typically for children, I kind of try to get them to do, you can actually start preparing about a week in advance. So, and the good thing is it's kind of coinciding with spring break. So sort of bringing things in a little earlier, bringing your bedtime routines a little earlier, especially for the little ones. So maybe having dinner a little earlier, sort of whatever your wind down routine is, a bath earlier, book earlier, making sure kids are sort of exercising so they burn some of that energy, get out in the sun. But those are a couple of things that you can kind of do about a week before we go into daylight savings, so that sort of adjusts so that by the time we switch over, they're more likely to fall asleep on time.
How does this specifically help impact kids when it comes to losing an hour of sleep? Obviously, it impacts their sleep schedule, but what else does it do for them?
Right. So, when in the spring, we kind of spring forward. So kids kind of end up having to get an hour less of sleep. And so when you're kind of going to sleep a little later, it's hard to get them to go to sleep that earlier time. And then they're waking up. It's harder for them to wake up. So they're having a shorter amount of sleep, which can affect them in many ways. I mean, I think for the little ones, it can make them cranky and sort of poor attention. But for our adolescents, especially in the springtime, you've got your little young drivers. They don't get that rest. They're going to have poor attention, poor concentration. It can affect their driving. So important to make sure we can make that adjustment really well.
And what about the fact that it falls on spring break for a lot of people in our area? Do you think that that's helpful, or is it going to be even a little more hectic with a lot of families who will be traveling and then trying to deal with the lack of sleep as well?
That's right. So it can work for you or it can work against you. So I think if you're traveling, I think it's going to be hard. But for the families that, I would still say try to sort of adjust it by a couple of minutes a day, because it can take up to a week to change. So if you can, well and good. If you can't, we're kind of stuck with it. But if you're in town, I would just say, sort of bring that that meal time a little earlier, get them to kind of go to sleep a couple of minutes earlier every day to help them adjust. But it usually takes about a week for that adjustment to take place. So if they don't manage during spring break, then expect that first week after spring break for kids to be a little tired.
So when should parents consider speaking to an expert just like yourself, a pediatrician, if they're seeing issues persist?
Right. So, typically, as I said, it usually takes about a week for that transition to take place. And so for most of our kiddos, as long as parents are making that adjustment, within about a week, they should be back in place. But again, if your child is taking longer, they're having a hard time falling asleep, like at our practice, Pediatric Concierge parents can come in and spend a lot of time talking about this, and we kind of work on each one of their sleep hygiene techniques to help them sort of make it target a particular thing.
For older kiddos especially, do you ever consider talking to parents about melatonin or any kind of supplement, or do you think it's best not to ever think about that?
Yeah, so as you know, melatonin is like it's a natural hormone that's produced in the body to help you sleep. It is not a sleep medication, so it is available over the counter. I think it's very important for families to know that it is not FDA approved, so you get all formulations with different dosages, and there is such a thing as melatonin poisoning. So I would really say, if unless you've spoken to your pediatrician or your pediatrician has recommended it after talking about sleep hygiene, I wouldn't recommend taking it just by yourself. Yes, I mean, we do recommend it. So as a pediatrician, I've given it to children with neurodevelopmental disorders on the autism spectrum. But in general, unless you've spoken to your pediatrician, I wouldn't.
All right, Dr. Ida Khanum, we appreciate you, especially going into this weekend where we're getting more sunshine, but a little bit less sleep.
Thank you so much.
So do what you do with concierge medicine, readily available for all your patients. They have her cell number. How cool is that?